So this morning it's going to be Mark 6, verses 45 to 52. And remember, we just got through Jesus feeding the 5,000 men. Verse 45. Immediately he made his disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side, to Bethsaida, where he dismissed the crowd. And after he had taken leave of them, he went up on the mountain to pray. And when evening came, the boat was out on the sea, and he was alone on the land. And he saw that they were making headway painfully, for the wind was against them. And about the fourth watch of the night, he came to them walking on the sea. He meant to pass by them, but when they saw he was walking on the sea, they thought it was a ghost and cried out. For they all saw him and were terrified, but immediately he spoke to them and said, "Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid." And he got into the boat with them, and the wind ceased, and they were utterly astonished, for they did not understand about the loaves, but their hearts were hardened. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, we just thank you. God, we thank you, even in the midst of troubling times, God, that you are sovereign, you are in control, and that you love us. Lord, I pray for Pastor Andrew this morning that you give him the words to speak, Lord. I just pray just for everyone out there, everyone here in this room, everyone just at home listening to sermons that are out and about. God, that you just strengthen our hearts. God, that we look at these circumstances not as a way to panic, God, but as a way to see opportunity to serve your will here on earth, God. We just love you so much, Lord. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you for that, Adam. Good morning. Kind of hot on this. Good to see you guys. You made it. It's been a crazy couple of days, huh? Right? Yeah. You guys heard of this thing called the coronavirus? Anybody?
No.
No, yeah, we'll fill you in later, Colton.
Yes.
And it's been, what's that?
Yes.
You've heard of it?
Yes, to the point of getting sick of it.
Yeah. Huh.
It's better than
Yeah. I don't know about this choice of words.
I'm getting
No, okay, good.
I'm getting sick.
Right. And it's not only been crazy a couple of days, it's actually, for me, been a crazy couple of weeks. I just find myself in these situations where my wheels are spinning, but I'm not getting anywhere. You guys ever done that? And it's in like a variety of different situations. I think a lot of you know that the Fiorini family and the Kanter family were adopting from Burundi, Africa. And so there are like enormous hurdles when you do something like that. And we have just completed our third home study update. So maybe if you're not in that world, maybe you don't know what I mean, but that's like we've been in this a long time. Most people don't do a third home study. And you're just kind of like, you got this mountain of paperwork, right? We're not matched with a child. The Fiorinis are matched with a child. Her name is Flora Fiorini. That's cool. And super cute. But it's like, but she's over there. So they have a child. Think about how you feel about your children now and wanting to protect them and hold them. And they have a child that they can't do any of those things with, right? All the way across the world. And bureaucracy right now is like hindering them from being with their child as they wait for a court to make an order to release this child. So it's like you do all this paperwork, you do all this stuff, you go through all these hoops, and it's like you feel like they're not going anywhere. Or another thing that I've been experiencing, I think the last 2 weeks I've spent approximately 16 hours on my taxes. So if when you're a pastor, you have like this unique tax situation that's very confusing, and then you read things online and there's conflicting things online, and you want to do the right thing, and it's like it seems impossible to do the right thing. And so you're just spinning, and I'm at the exact same spot. after 16 hours of doing that. And when I think about walking in his footsteps, okay, I mean, Kathy and I have poured hours into walking in his footsteps, and we were joyfully doing that. I mean, most of the time, right, Kathy? And it's like, and then there were these moments, like, and we like super dialed it in, guys. Like, I have a booklet, Walking in His Footsteps. I even put a graphic on it, and it has every little bitty step that you do to get the whole job done, all broken out into teams with team leaders and the team, the team underneath them on the date which they will do it. At the front is like this calendar that it's all that. It's like it's all dialed in, ready to go. Here we go. And then we had it so where it was super efficient. I've been on the phone with Elin. Some of you have been making posts. All of us have been putting all this work into it, and then it's just like boom. It's canceled, and it's pretty jarring. I mean, to me, right? It's like your wheels are spinning, and you don't feel like you're going anywhere. And then I'm thinking, okay, Lord, all this coronavirus stuff. And I'm looking at the passage, right? And what I see there is the disciples are experiencing the exact same thing. If you look at our passage beginning in verse 48, there it says, and he, so speaking of Christ, saw that they, the disciples, were making headway painfully, for the wind was against them, and about the fourth watch of the night he came to them. So here's what you have to understand. At this time, the disciples have been rowing for hours. Somewhere between 6 to 12 hours in the middle of the night. So think about doing anything throughout the whole night. Like just sitting up awake would be hard to do the whole night. And they're rowing, which is like one of the hardest physical. Have you ever rowed for a long period of time? Yeah, it's hard to do that. They're doing it for hours and hours and hours, and they're where? At the same spot. Right? So we believe, right, God has a perfect plan that includes struggles. Right? We believe that. But then I read something like that, and I say, okay, God, what's the point of that? Like, what would be the point of like struggle? Like, it'd be something if it was like you run the marathon, it's really, really hard, and then you get there. But you're at the same spot? Like, what could that accomplish? And when I think about all the stuff for the adoption, all the work poured into the taxes, all the work we poured into walking in its footsteps, and it's all stopping, it's hard to understand, right? But remember a couple weeks ago when we were back in Mark, what did we learn there? Things are not always as they appear to be, right? There is what you see going on, right? Then there's what God is doing, and then there's this invitation to join God in what He is doing. And what we saw is when you put on the lens of God's Word and God's Spirit, what at first seemed like a crowd of people with an enormous amount of needs, in a place with limited resources, with people who had no resources, what that actually was, because it seemed like a disaster, what that actually was this opportunity for Jesus to reveal Himself as the promised shepherd king, to put on a banquet in the middle of the wilderness, as was expected of the shepherd king, and then invite the disciples to participate in what He was doing, with 12 baskets left over for them at the end of it. They didn't lack anything at the end of all that. And then if you look at the end of John chapter 6, you keep reading, because that's where the parallel passage is, you learn that all of that is actually pointing to something even greater, right? The distribution of Jesus Himself. Right? Because Jesus is the bread of heaven. Right? And a little at the end of John chapter 6, He really weeds out the crowd when He says, hey, and now eat my body and drink my blood. And then everybody's like, well, this is where I leave. Right? You know? And the disciples say, where can we go? You have the words of life. Right? And you're at that crossroads where you don't understand. Now, here's the thing. You're probably putting things together already. How relevant is this to us right now? Because there's what we see, right? And what is it that we see? We see hordes of people, lots of experts with graphs and things like that. We've got limited resources, not enough tests, not enough ventilators, not enough toilet paper, right? And then Brandon's trying to get us to eat a bunch of cheese. That doesn't help, right? Right. We should be eating things of a different nature, I believe. And then we don't have the things that we need. We don't have a hand sanitizer, which none of us had 20 years ago, by the way. And so we have these concerns. There's what we see. There's what we see. But then there's what God is doing. Right? And I don't know exactly what God is doing. But here's what I do know. Is that there's an invitation in this. There's an invitation to join God in what He's doing. And it's going to include the sharing of the bread of life. For people who are in a panic. And in a frenzy. Because what we see in the Gospels and in life is that Jesus demonstrates the magnitude and the extent and the scope of His power against the backdrop of insurmountable obstacles. How do we see that over and over again in the Bible? It reveals who He is. I don't know if you felt this last week. How many were here last week? Most of you? Okay, so like I said, I don't know if you felt this, but I felt God did something in this room. Like something broke loose in this room, and God came and visited us. And I feel like God's just doing something in general. One of the things that Bobby has given me permission to share is, Bobby said, I believed, but God came in. That's what she said last week. And come on. That's powerful. Right? And then she's also been testifying, like she's reading the scriptures, but she's also coming against a lot of opposition from the enemy. Like a ton. Right? But here's the encouragement even in that. Against that backdrop of increased opposition, let's say wind, right? Jesus is going to show up for you, Bobby. And He's going to help you through that. Because that's what He does. He is a powerful king. And in our passage, we're going to see that how exactly, okay, we get it. He's powerful. How is He going to use His power? And in this passage, we see that He uses His power to, one, this is our first point, to preserve the true message of His kingdom.
Amen.
That's the first thing that He's going to do. The second thing that He's going to do is He's going to reveal the true nature of His authority. And we'll see how that is. And the third thing He's going to do is He's going to draw near to those who are His. Yep. Right? In the midst of all of that. But the first thing, He preserves the true message of His kingdom. And that's kind of how He's going to protect the disciples in this. Look back with me on verse 45. There it says, immediately He made His disciples get into the boat and go before Him to the other side, to Bethsaida, while He dismissed the crowd. So right away, Jesus the Shepherd King does two things with His authority. He sends the disciples away and He dismisses the crowd. And it's interesting, when He sends the disciples away, this word, it's kind of interesting. It's made is forced. Literally is forced. I don't know how that looks like. I mean, I have the picture of like a policeman like putting the guy's head down and getting him into the car. It's like, no, you're going to go away in a boat now. And then He dismisses thousands of people. No PA system, by Himself. How do you do that? Right? Well, because He's the King of the universe. That's how He did that. It's like, you are leaving now. And they're like, oh, okay. And then they just leave. Thousands of people. Now, but the question comes, okay, why did Jesus use His authority in that way? So I think we get a clue if you look at the parallel passage in John chapter 6. Right after Jesus has the feeding of the 5,000, which we said is probably more like 10 to 25,000. We read this in John chapter 6, verse 15. Perceiving then that they, so he's referring to the crowd, were about to come and take him by force and make him king, Jesus withdrew again to the mountain by himself. Okay, so if you are Jesus's PR agent at this moment, you are confused and very frustrated, right? Because what has Jesus been saying? He's been going all around this area and he's saying, repent, the kingdom of God is what? Is at hand. Because I'm the king and I'm here. And then you get thousands and thousands and thousands of people who say, yes, we want you as our king. And Jesus is like, all right, see you, I'm going to the mountain. Like, what's that about? But it becomes more clear, though, if you keep reading. In John chapter 6, this is the next day when the crowd comes to Jesus. He says this in John chapter 6, verse 26. Truly, truly, I say to you, you are seeking me not because you saw signs, but because you ate your fill of the loaves. So what he's saying is, you're not coming to me because you understood the significance of what happened yesterday. I'm the shepherd king who was foretold, and you are to submit to me, the shepherd king. I'm the bread. That was what you were supposed to get. But you're not coming to me for that. Instead, you're coming to me as a genie who, like, I'm going to use you to get what I want in a worldly type of way. We can overthrow the Romans who are oppressing us, they say. We can have you as our, like, you're like our oven. Right? We just throw, like a magic oven, really. Like, we just throw a little bit of bread in there, 2 sardines in there, and then boom, like, we've got meal for thousands and thousands of people. Right? So that's a pretty good deal. Like, we want that kind of king. Bread on demand kind of king. And then Jesus is saying, no, I'm like, that's not how my kingdom works. Right? I didn't come to bring a more powerful kingdom like the kingdoms you already know about. Like, this is a completely different kind of kingdom. And so he sends the disciples away, and he dismisses the crowd. And see, what he's doing is he's preserving, isn't he, the true message of his kingdom, and he's also protecting the disciples from joining in the frenzy of the crowd. How applicable is this? What's going to happen as you continue to follow God is you're going to become increasingly convinced that you have a Father. Like at first, you believe it up here and you believe it a little in here, right? And then that's going to grow. And as that grows, you're going to be increasingly convinced, I am not an orphan that has to scrounge around for all the limited resources and hunker down. That you're gonna begin to believe, I have a Father, right, who has unlimited resources. Right? I don't have to scrounge around and scrape around for myself. Because God, my Father, He's gonna take care of me in the way He wants to take care of me. Now that might not look like bread on demand or what you think you need. But it will be exactly what you need. Because He's a good Father in that type of way. So He's preserving the message. He's protecting the disciples from the frenzy of the crowd. But there's another thing that's happening too, I believe. I think Jesus is grounding Himself in the true nature of the kingdom. Right? Which is all about, by the way, His union with His Father. That's what the kingdom is about. The kingdom is about union with the King. And submitting to this king. And so what do you see Jesus do? In verse 46. And after He had taken leave of them, He went up on the mountain to pray. So Jesus, He needed to commune with His Father. And then He also needed to intercede. Because that's one of the roles of Jesus. He's king, but He's also priest. And so He intercedes for His disciples who He sent into a storm. Right? If you keep reading in verse 46, it says, and after, a little bit farther down, verse 47, and when evening came, the boat was out on the sea, and he was alone on the land. And he saw that they were making headway painfully, for the wind was against them. So here's the thing. Jesus didn't come for you to never become hungry. That's not the reason why he came. He didn't come so he could meet all your worldly needs. He does in like an inside-out way in the future, right? But he begins on the inside. He didn't come so that you wouldn't experience a pandemic. That's not why he came. In fact, Jesus will sometimes intentionally, deliberately send you into a storm because that's what you need for him to reveal himself to you in a greater way that he couldn't do without the storm. And that's the true nature of his kingdom. Right? His kingdom is not about you taking him and shaping him into who you want him to be so that he'll do what you want him to do. Right? His kingdom is about him taking the circumstances that you experience, his spirit and his word to shape you into the image of Jesus. That's the nature of Jesus' kingdom. And so we see Jesus, he uses his authority against the backdrop of this storm to preserve this message, but then also to reveal the true nature of his authority. If you keep reading in verse 48, it says, and he saw that they were making headway painfully, for the wind was against them. And about the fourth watch of the night, he came to them walking on the sea. Okay, so Jesus had sent them out around 6 p.m. to 9 p.m., somewhere in that range. Now he's coming at the fourth watch. When's that? 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. in the morning. Right? And he does come, but it seems like he's waited. He doesn't come right away. He comes, but he comes in his own timing in order to reveal something to them about himself. And so he comes walking on the water. Now that is amazing in and of itself, right? But it's even more amazing than we realize. Because in the Old Testament, only Yahweh walks on water. And you see that in Psalms, you see that in the book of Isaiah. But you also see it in the oldest book of the Bible, which is Job. In Job chapter 9, Job is listing out all the things that are unique to Yahweh. And one of the things he says is, who alone stretched out the heavens and trampled the waves of the sea. Now, in the Greek translation of that passage, which was the one that was most available to the apostles, like I could see Mark having it out, right, as Peter is like instructing him on what to write and things like that. Like, these words are almost exactly parallel with that of Mark chapter 6. So Yahweh is the only one who walks on the water, and then on top of that, Yahweh is the only one that passes by in this type of way. Did you catch that? In the latter part of verse 48, kind of interesting. And about the fourth watch of the night, he came to them walking on the sea. He meant to pass by them. Now what does that mean? Was Jesus' intention to like just walk by and then he changed his mind and then went into the boat? It's a little bit clearer in the original that he came because he saw them struggling. So that's why he came. And so would he just pass by them? And that doesn't seem very likely. So what is going on? If you dig a little bit deeper, then you begin to realize that this verb that's being used here, which is a very specific verb that takes on this kind of semi-technical sense in the Old Testament, refers to those times when God reveals his glory in a special way. If you think back, this same word is used in Exodus chapter 33. When Moses, remember what he does? He says what? Show me your glory. And then what does God do? He puts He puts him in the cleft of the rock. He covers him with his hand. And then he passes, same word. He passes by him. And then what does Moses see? His back. Just his back. Right? In 1 Kings chapter 19, the prophet Elijah, he believes that he is the only faithful one in Israel. And that his ministry is going nowhere. And that his wheels are just spinning. And then God says, check this out. 1 Kings chapter 19, 11. Go out and stand out on the mountain before the Lord. It's an echo of Exodus chapter 33. And behold, the Lord passed by. Same verb in this passage. If you go on in the scripture, in Job chapter 9, the same passage where it's like, only Yahweh walks on water. It goes on to say in verse 10, who does great things beyond searching out, and marvelous things beyond number. Behold, he passes by me. In all these ways, God is revealing himself in a unique way. And Jesus is saying, like, yeah, I do that. I walk on water. I pass by you in this way because I'm Yahweh. And then he makes it even more explicit because he says, I'm the great I am. If you look in verse 49, but when they saw him walking on the sea, they thought it was a ghost and cried out, for they all saw him and were terrified. But immediately he spoke to them and said, take heart. It is I. Do not be afraid. Now, Jesus is answering a question that the disciples had back in Mark chapter 5, where they're experiencing a similar type of storm. Not exactly the same, but similar. Right? And they asked there, who then is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him? And then Jesus here, when he says, it is I, that's what we read, it is I, but that's actually ego eimi. That is, I am, which is the covenant name of God in the Old Testament. If you look back in Exodus chapter 3, God is meeting with Moses in the burning bush. And he's explained to Moses, I'm going to send you to deliver my people Israel out of the hand of Egypt. Right? And then Moses says what? He has all kinds of objections. But one of the things he says is, well, who am I going to say sent me? Right? And then God replies in this way, I am who I am. And he said, say this to the people of Israel, I am has sent me to you. So he says, take heart. I am. Do not be afraid. Right? And Jesus has used this before. Right? In John, several times. But maybe my favorite time is in John chapter 8, verse 58. He says, before Abraham was, I am. Right? And what did they do? They knew what he was talking about. They picked up stones. Right? You don't just say stuff like that. Right? That's we've said this before, but that's one of those moments where you're like, Jesus is just a good teacher. Like, that's not good teaching if it's not true. That's like wicked. That's deceptive. That's crazy town. That's 5150. That's anything but a good teacher. Right? But he is the I am. And see, like, he's like, okay, you guys know Abraham. You look up to Abraham? Okay, and he, within time and space, right, he had a beginning and an end, right? I stand outside that. I am. I just am. I'm the beginning and the end, the Alpha, the Omega, the first, the last. Before everything was, I am. I interact with creation, but don't mistake me for creation. I'm the eternal I am, the absolute ground of authority. So he says, take heart. The absolute ground of all reality is here. Don't be afraid. Well, of course you wouldn't be afraid. If you hear what he's saying, and we memorize the verse, but do we hear it? Do I hear it? Because I think that would change things if I heard that. So Jesus, he comes to them. He's walking on the water. He passes by them. And he does that in order to reveal who he is. in this special, greater way. I'm the great I am. I'm a person. I'm a king. You know I'm a king, but I'm a king with divine authority. And so, remember, okay, so Jesus sent them into the storm. He sent them. But he doesn't do it without a purpose. He's preserving his message. He's protecting his disciples. He's revealing in a greater way than ever before who he is. And then he's revealing Yahweh in a greater way than ever before. What did Moses see? His back. And now we see Jesus revealing the Father. He says, if you see me, you've seen the Father. Like you're looking Yahweh in the face right now. In Jesus. Right? So he comes to be known in a greater way. But he also comes to draw near. This is our third and final point. Jesus uses his power and authority to draw near to those who are his, even if we don't always see it at first. Right? Because I didn't see it at first. Right? I feel like I'm spinning. I'm rolling as fast as I can relative to adoption, wearing me out. Taxes, wearing me out. Right? Walking in his footsteps, the whole coronavirus thing, it just feels like, what could be the purpose of this? But then God spoke to me. And I'm just sharing what he's telling me in this passage. It's several things he said to me. He reminded me, I sent you into the storm. Like, Jay, why are we adopted? God sent us. I mean, we have like crazy circumstances. Like, we're talking like visions and dreams type stuff. Right? God sent me, called me to adoption. Who said, hey, I want you to go do this thing. You're afraid of public speaking. So I'm going to make your job all about public speaking. I'm going to send you to a place that you've never been and something that you vowed you'd never do. Right? God did that. And that put me in a really weird tax situation. You know? That I just cannot figure out. I mean, I just can't figure it out. It's like, I did that. With joy. Kathy and I were meeting together, and I love meeting with Kathy. I'll have any excuse to do that. So, and we're like pouring ourselves over this thing, and it's just like, I did that. I even did that. Like, even if it's canceled, God? Yes. Well, what about all the work? Yeah, that's not for loss. I'm doing something. I'm doing something. He said to me, another thing he said was, so I sent you, that's the first thing he said, and then I felt him say, look up. Look up. What do you see? Do you see me walking towards you in the water? Or do you just see ghosts? What is it that you see? Because I haven't sent you into the storm to harm you. That's not why I sent you into the storm. I sent you in the storm to reveal things to you and then to get into the boat with you. Notice what Jesus does. Jesus doesn't come up to the disciples and go, row harder! Like, that's how I deal with my problems. I just row harder. You know? And he doesn't do that. Instead, we read this in 50, the latter part of verse 50. But immediately he spoke to them and said, take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid. And he got into the boat with them. And the winds ceased. The third thing I felt like God was speaking to me in this was he saying, okay, what are you going to do, Andrew? Are you going to harden your heart, or are you going to submit to me as king? Are you going to be disappointed that I'm not bread on demand God, or are you going to submit to my program? Very clearly. Right? But you look the last two verses, 51 and 52. And he got into the boat with them, and the wind ceased, and they were utterly astounded. Because they did not understand about the loaves, but their hearts were hardened. So they're astounded. I mean, How many of you have seen people walk on water? I haven't. There's that one magician guy in Las Vegas. He does something, but then they even revealed how he did that. So I have no idea. I've never seen anybody walk on water. Nobody has seen somebody take 5 loaves of bread and feed 20,000 people. Like no one. So they're astounded, but that doesn't mean that they trust him for who he is. Right? So because their hearts are hardened, and they have ample evidence. So it's not about the evidence. Right? There's something that has to happen in their heart. And so the question for us is, where do you find yourself rowing against the wind? And when you look up, what is it that you see? Do you see ghosts? Scary ghosts on Channel 3. Right? Or do you see Jesus walking towards you in the water? What are you going to do? Are you going to harden your heart and join the frenzy of the crowd? Like the whole world's having a panic attack right now. You're going to join the frenzy of the crowd, or you're going to trust Jesus? Because this is what I want to say in closing, and thinking about, okay, so we canceled walking in his footsteps. Very hard. Like hours and hours and hours of prayer, talking to many of you. Very hard. But this is what I don't want you to get out of that. I don't want you to get out of, okay, we've canceled walking in his footsteps. Good. Now, I can hoard all the resources and hunker down in my house and preserve myself. And if anybody comes close, well, I know what to do then. Right? That is not that. No, this is not Second Amendment time. Like this is right. So we're canceling walking in his footsteps so that you can walk in his footsteps. Right? So instead of saying, look, community, you're afraid. Unfounded, doesn't matter. You're afraid. You have to come to our event. That's how we're going to minister to you. And if you don't come to our event, well, then that shows where you are. Right? Do we want to take that kind of a posture, or do we want to actually follow in his footsteps and walk into the storm toward the people who are rowing as fast as they can against the wind, buying as much toilet paper as you don't need that much toilet paper, right? Getting as much hand sanitizer as they pop. They're just rowing. What would it look like instead of going like, oh, hunker down? What if you took one of your 700 rolls of toilet paper that you have at your house right now and looked around and said, you know what? Instead of hoarding this, I'm going to figure out, what would it mean? We love walking in his footsteps. There are a couple people who've been born again going through that in this room, like right now. What would it look like if we went out? What kind of impact would that have? And I don't even know exactly what that looks like. I know that we have a lot of canned goods. Less than usual because we've been trying to weed it out for walking in his footsteps. We have a lot of canned goods. I know that you have elderly people in your neighborhood, right? Who may be afraid. They're maybe afraid. Right? I'm reading these stories about like elderly people like giving people like $100 bills and saying, "Can you please like just buy me some groceries?" You know. So what would it look like for us, as the Lord leads you, to be proactive about that and figure out what needs are out there? then they can meet Jesus in you. Right? Okay, they don't want to do it our way. Our way is a pretty spectacular way. Have you seen walking in his footsteps? They should, they won't do it that way. What if we went out? That's just my challenge to you. I'm not trying to I'm not trying to be oppressive about that. Right? But listen to the Lord. What's interesting about that passage in 1 Kings chapter 19, where he passes by Elijah. Remember, it's like, I'm not in the wind. I'm not in the fire. I'm in the whisper. Right? And so, if he's whispering to you about, yeah, my neighbor, it's like, what would it mean for him? Last year you gave him a flyer to walk in his footsteps, and that was good. That was good. This year, you bring some toilet paper. Right? And it actually might, to that person at that moment, it might be more meaningful to them. Right?
Water.
Brandon's going to be bringing them cheese. Right? To exacerbate the problem. But there's just, all I'm saying is that there's this opportunity, right, to join God in what He's doing. Let's pray together. Father, we need you to meet us. And to some of us, Lord, are scared. And we need you to come and say, I am. Do not be afraid. Some of us, Lord, we are very proud of the way that we can hoard supplies and be ready for anything. Lord, would you break that in us? And would you give us a spirit of sacrifice that only comes from you? We can't muster it up, God. Make us like Jesus, who laid his life down so that others might live. Show us what that means tangibly in these coming days, so that we can be a testimony, Lord, of being a people who are not people of fear, but people who are governed by your love, the love of the Shepherd King. We pray this in his name. Amen.